Let's talk about some NCAA playoff rankings week number 6. And this is probably the most jumbled up this we've gotten so far. You had a couple teams jumping in, you had one team sliding down, you have a couple mix-ups going on the top, so let's just run them down. So no surprise, Alabama stayed at number 1. They beat Auburn 55-44. And if you didn't watch this game, it was spectacular. I mean, just touchdowns, left, right, sideways, up, down. You know, it was a fun game to watch. That is the Iron Bowl, so Alabama did win that. Their next game is against Missouri in the SEC championship game. Now, this is not going to be any pushover game. Missouri is a good team. They're ranked number 16, so anything could happen. My bet is that Alabama will maintain their number 1 ranking after this weekend, and you will see them in the first playoffs. Then you have number 2, Oregon beat their in-state rival, Oregon State. Now, they beat them pretty handily. I didn't even write down the score. That's how handily it was. And they probably have, I believe they have the toughest competition coming up this next week of any of the top 6 teams that we'll talk about. They have to play number 7 Arizona in the Pac-12 championship. So, again, if Oregon wins, they've just locked in their spot. There are no problems there. They're going to be in the playoffs too. So I'm pretty sure both these teams will win. Arizona is a good team. Do they have enough to quite beat Oregon? I don't think so. Oregon's they're always in this spot. Marcus Mariota is showing why he's a top Heisman candidate because he can take over games. So look for that to happen this weekend. Then you have number 3 is TCU. Now they actually jumped from last week as number 5. And they jumped up into the number 3 spot, which was pretty interesting. Oh, no, I'm sorry. TCU was number 4 last week. I apologize. TCU was number 4. So they just
jump. They just a little bit.
They leapfrogged FSU. Now, FSU didn't lose, but they just barely win. But TCU crushed, absolutely demolished Texas. Now, Texas, one of the traditional powers out there, this is a down year for them. I believe they're 6-6 now, bowl eligible, but not necessarily as good as they usually are. Usually they're in talks for, championship winning. But they're not going to make it this year. They were 6-6, but TCU did beat them 48-10. Now, I don't want to say they're in trouble, but if I'm going to see any of these teams, if the top 2 teams don't lose and none of these teams lose, the only team I really see shifting would be TCU back down, maybe a spot. Unfortunately, maybe 2 spots, because their last game they're playing against 2-9 Iowa State. And so that is the worst competition any of these top teams, because all the other top teams are playing college football playoff ranked team, because they only rank the top 25. So that's the closest one there. And then you have Florida State. They dropped from number 3 down to number 4. Now there's a whole bunch of really not weird things, but stuff is going on over there in Florida State, especially with Jameis Winston. We won't get into that right now. I don't like to talk about
We've talked about Jameis Winston quite a few times before.
Yeah, and we've talked about his antics enough. But there's too much pending things going on, so we're going to stay away from that. But they barely beat a bad Florida, not a bad Florida. When I say a bad Florida team, I mean bad for a Florida team. I believe they're 6-6 as well, and they just fired their coach. They barely beat them 24-19. So they squeaked that one out. And they're playing in the ACC championship game a number 11 Georgia Tech, which has a good defense and a very opportunistic offense. So if they try to play their little games where, we'll just have a 20-point halftime disadvantage, or we'll let them get up by 14 points, be careful, because I don't think Georgia Tech will let you back in there. And that's what we've been seeing out of Florida State. That's why you've seen them drop down the rankings, because they'll let teams get out to a 20-point halftime lead, a 21-point halftime lead, a 14-point halftime lead, and then they come surging back and just barely beat them. That's kind of what these voters, the committee, has not liked. They haven't enjoyed seeing that. They want to see you go out there and dominate competition that's below you. So they're kind of grading on a curve with that, not just strictly, okay, you won the game, so we'll keep you where you are. It's how did you win the game? That's kind of how they're grading them. So
and who did you beat and everything else.
Who did you beat? How did you beat them? That's all coming into play this year. Then you have number 5, Ohio State. Now, they probably have the best argument for being in the top 4, other than Oregon and Alabama. TCU, if Ohio State was there instead of TCU, I wouldn't be complaining, because they've played a really good Big Ten. Not a really good Big Ten, but a good Big Ten. Now, they just last week beat Michigan, again, another 6-6 team. These are traditional rivals. This was rivalry weekend last weekend. So traditional rivals that are usually a lot better than they are now on down years, but they have to play in the Big Ten championship against number 13 Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, we all know, is led by Melvin Gordon, the phenom that broke LaDainian Tomlinson's record. He got the Chewbacca Chainsaw Award a couple weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago. So that should be a very, very entertaining game. And if they win that, don't be surprised if they jump up. And then I just
not one of those guarantees either. That's clearly the team's number 13, so lower rank, but 13 is pretty good right now.
Yeah.
So
then number 6 we have Baylor. Now this is a very interesting question, Baylor, because Baylor is 10-1. So is TCU. They both play in the Big 12. There is no Big 12 championship game, but that's where they both play. Now Baylor early in the year gave TCU their one loss. That is the one team that beat TCU. Now Baylor lost to West Virginia though, which is not as good of a team as Baylor is. So Baylor losing to West Virginia is almost a little worse than TCU losing to Baylor. But I say if they beat them, then it's lots of debate going on right there. But they play Kansas State this weekend, ranked at number 9. So that is the best. Oh no, sorry, Arizona is the best team that anybody has to play left, and that's Oregon. But the second best is Kansas State at number 9. So we could see a big shift no matter what happens. Even if all of these 6 teams win, we could see a pretty big shift. I mean, I would not be surprised if all of these teams win. We see TCU drop back to number 4, Ohio State drop into number 3. Wouldn't be surprised. Florida State drops out of the top. Even though if they beat Georgia Tech, it would be hard to say they would drop out of the top. You know what? They just need a 16 playoff. That's the best argument I can make for a 16 playoff.
Yeah, especially in the NCAA. I mean, we have 25. We're ranking 25 top teams. Why don't they have more teams in playoffs? So yeah, at least 6 teams. I'd really say 8 teams makes sense.
I think 8 teams is better, just numbers-wise, because then you can have 4 games, then 2 games, then 1 game. 6 teams, you'd have to have 2 bye weeks in there, so that'd be a little bit weird. But I do love the playoffs. I think this is great. This has given me awesome stuff to talk about the past 6 weeks. I've loved it. Thank you, college football, for finally putting in the playoff. But do not think your work is done, because it's not. There is still something to be done. And I don't think adding one more game to this, or maybe, hey, you don't play 11 games. Play 10 if you think you're a good scorer. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, because I know what they're saying. They don't want these kids to be out on the field for that much longer. They do have school. This is about the time midterms start, so they do want them to focus on those studies. But who are we kidding? Football players don't have to study in college. Some of them do, I guess.
It's a mixed bag.
Yeah,
honestly is a mixed bag.
But I don't know. Let me know what you think. If all of the teams win this weekend, are the rankings going to stay the same? Is one of these teams going to pop out? I mean, is TCU going to fall even though they win? And if Ohio State jump in because they're playing a better opponent this weekend? Hit us up. Let us know. Comments down below. Of course, at Where's My Face on Twitter. Where's My Face at gmail.com. Google Plus and Facebook. Always good ways of getting a hold of us. But let's keep on moving.